Hello everyone, Mike here. And they say that every comic is someone's first. Well, in my case, that comic came out in 1988, and it was Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man number 210, which was actually a reprint of Amazing Spider-Man number 134. But I actually didn't realize that until years later. And this was my introduction pretty much to the character of Spider-Man in general. So was it a good introduction to the character? Well, let's talk about it. But first, here's a quick little promo for another comic-related bit of media.
In 1985, Who's Who, the definitive directory of the DC Universe, combined a new piece of art with a text entry to create a brisk monthly comic book format encyclopedia covering the characters and concepts of the world that Superman built. The last volume of Who's Who was released in 1992, right around the time I began to make DC Comics my publisher of choice. I'm Diablo Frank. I'll be recruiting a cadre of expert secret agents to take up the gauntlet thrown down by Who's Who on its 40th anniversary via its successor volumes, the DC Secret Files and Origins. This show intends to spend its first year looking backward to the very beginning of the DC Universe, until we turn back around to work our way, month by month, toward the Chromium Age DC Secret Files, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe, 1993 through 2011. Be there for the premiere on April 2nd, launching as part of the JS April 2025 multimedia crossover event. Available on the All Ages 4-color Rolled Spine feed.
Alright, so Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man number 210 or Amazing Spider-Man number 134. Now I will say, as far as the respective covers, I actually like the cover for Marvel Tales more, and I don't think it's entirely because of the nostalgia factor. I just think this action shot of Spider-Man and the villain in this comic, Tarantula, is really cool, and in my opinion, just a better shot than the original cover. But this is not obviously going to be any comparison thing, because that's the only difference. So let's get into the story itself. We are brought right into Peter just finishing up some patrolling as Spider-Man and getting ready to get together with Mary Jane, Flash, and Liz for a little day trip on a boat around the Hudson. Spidey does take note of the fact that he is almost out of web fluid, but he figures, it shouldn't be a problem. What am I going to need it for? So he gets changed into his regular clothing and meets up with his friends, while thinking to himself how much he needs this break with everything that's been going on lately, specifically mentioning the Dr. Octopus Aunt May almost marriage that had happened. And this actually is something I'm going to get into a little bit of a digression here. And it's the constant idea of, why do I have to do homework in order to be able to enjoy a comic or a comic book based movie? The idea that if you haven't seen all the stuff that came before, you can't enjoy the product you're watching. And I don't think that that's fair, because let's face it, with as many comic book movies as there are now, and especially how long the MCU, for example, has been around, it's almost impossible to have seen everything. There's so much. But the idea that if you haven't seen everything, it means you can't enjoy something. If, something that happened in a previous movie is referenced in the one you're currently watching, it completely ruins the movie for you. It's like, this is how comics have worked for years. And right here, 1988, this book came out. I was, I believe, 6 years old. Now, obviously, I didn't know anything about this Dr. Octopus Aunt May marriage, or there's some other stuff that's going to come up that are references to past issues. This didn't ruin the story for me, because I was still able to enjoy what I was seeing. But I think people have just gotten so elitist, maybe? I don't know. Just, they want everything like spelled out for them, but without having to do any work. But all I can think is, do you want to watch a movie where they spend almost the entire movie just explaining all the past references so that you get it? It's like, just enjoy the movie. They're not that complicated that you can't enjoy the movie even if you haven't seen all the past stuff. Anyway, moving on, we're going to get off of that. So, the day trip starts out. Everyone's having a good time until the terrorists show up. Yes, we have this Hispanic terrorist called Tarantula, along with his two sidekicks, Hidalgo and Jose. And I remember that his two sidekicks are named Hidalgo and Jose because they constantly refer to themselves in the third person. Apparently, they want to make sure everyone knows exactly who they are. Anyway, Pete manages to sneak off, get into his Spider-Man costume, and steps in to fight. Unfortunately, one of the crewmen ends up getting knocked off the ship, so Spidey has to jump out, save him, and swing them up onto a bridge, which, fortunately, the ship happened to be passing a bridge. Unfortunately, this is the last of Spider-Man's web fluid, so now he has no way to get back to the ship. So he has to try to get back home, but unfortunately, this is New York, and his attempts to hitchhike don't exactly work because most of the people just think he's some nut in a Spider-Man costume, not the actual Spider-Man, and nobody wants to stop for him. So he kind of just has to jump on top of a truck and ride close enough to home. He gets back home, hops into his apartment, and quickly grabs some new web fluid before jumping back out the window. Unfortunately, in his haste, he didn't realize that his roommate, Harry Osborn, has seen him and now knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. This is where we get more of references to old stuff, with, of course, the death of Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, and Harry's belief that Spider-Man killed him. So now, Harry thinks that Peter killed his father. This is stuff that would be brought up further in later issues. So anyway, Spider-Man's on his way back to the ship, but before we get to that, we head over to the Daily Bugle, where J. Jonah Jameson receives a call from the mayor. Now, at first, he thinks that he's going to get some praise for the wonderful news that he has been putting out. But instead, since he had always offered to help the mayor out in any way he can, the mayor has decided that the ransom money that Tarantula is asking for should be provided by the Bugle. And this is a very humorous moment because we have like 3 or 4 panels here where we see Jonah start out with this big smile and it just progressively disappears and becomes more and more distraught as he realizes what the mayor wants him to do. It is really funny. Anyway, we get back just as Flash is deciding he's had enough of being a hostage and is going to try to fight. This doesn't go well for him because obviously he's not the main character, and Tarantula pretty much easily wipes the floor with him, just as Spider-Man manages to get back in there. And Spider-Man handles the sidekicks, Hidalgo and Jose, and unfortunately though, while he's fighting him, Tarantula manages to land a kick, and he's got these little like pointed boots with some type of venom or something in them, so of course Spider-Man is immediately now in a little bit of trouble. But that's when everybody's hero Flash gets involved again, figuring, oh, I gotta help Spider-Man out here. So he jumps in, nearly getting kicked by Tarantula, but Spider-Man steps in the way and takes a second kick. Spider-Man is now pretty heavily drugged and unable to fight back. And that's when things get even worse, because somebody else was on that cruise, and for some reason thinks that Spider-Man is involved with Tarantula. He thinks that they've had a falling out now. But yes, holding a gun down on the injured Spider-Man is Frank Castle, the Punisher. And I have to wonder, what was he doing there? Did Frank just decide, well, time to take a little break from, killing criminals and doing all my vigilante stuff? I think I'll take a little day cruise. I'll make sure to bring all my guns with me on this day cruise. But this is where the story ends. It's a to be continued, and I do actually have the next issue, thankfully. But we're going to get into the next issue next time. I will say, though, I like this story. This was a good way to introduce someone, especially a young person like I was at the time, to Spider-Man. We get his one-liners, we get some action, we're introduced to some of his supporting cast. This was a lot of fun and was definitely a good introduction to Spider-Man. Of course, I would go on to see him in cartoons and the live-action series with Nicholas Hammond. I saw a lot of reruns of that after this. And this comic is probably part of the reason that I am a huge Spider-Man fan to this day. But that's all I've got on this one. I will be back to look at the second part of this story next time. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and subscribe. It does a lot to help me out. And until next time.